Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Matt Schmidt, Program Director at the Trust for Public Land and Vice Director of Education for the American Planning Association Cleveland section, and a proud City Club member. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to today's speaker, the President and CEO of the Central Indiana Community Foundation and Civic Champion of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, Brian Payne. Today's forum is the keynote address for the We Plan CLE, the American Planning Association Cleveland section's annual series of events, open to all, designed to foster discussion and innovation. This year's theme, ACT, highlights that we all contribute to places that matter through collective visions and individual actions. We each have the power to improve our surroundings and make positive impacts in our communities. Across the country, parks like New York's High Line and Chicago's Millennium Park have attracted attention as cities strive to create vibrant green spaces. Here in Cleveland, the Cleveland Foundation Centennial Lake Link Trail was completed this summer. The Towpath Trail extension opened, and the Red Line Greenway is about to break ground. As we look to the future of biking and connectivity in Cleveland's neighborhoods, one project that has radically changed a city and can serve as a model for cities like ours is the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. The Cultural Trail is an 8-mile bicycle and pedestrian pathway that connects cultural, arts, and entertainment districts throughout downtown Indianapolis. The trail has had massive ripple effects. Residential development downtown has increased, and thousands of new jobs have been reported, along with $1 billion of capital investment. The success has encouraged leaders to aim to triple the 75 miles of bike lanes that already exist in the city. The Indianapolis Cultural Trail is the brainchild of our speaker today. Within months of moving to Indianapolis from California to take the role as the CEO of the Central Indiana Community Foundation, Mr. Payne hatched the idea of the Cultural Trail. It took several years, countless meetings, and more than $63 million of funding to bring the concept to fruition. And that wasn't even a part of his daily job. For his work, Mr. Payne received the Indianapolis Business Journal's Michael A. Carroll Leadership Award, Visit Indy's prestigious Bill McGowan Leadership Award, Downtown Indy's Downtown Champion Award, and the Indiana University Public Policy Institute's John Krause Award for Innovation in Public Policy. He's also been honored as the Indiana Citizen Planner of the Year and has been recognized as one of the world's most powerful Hoosiers. In 2016, in 2016, Mr. Payne was recognized as an Indiana Living Legend by the Indiana Historical Society. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Brian Payne.
Thanks, Matt. Great job. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. Before I get started, I do want to say one thing. Damn it, Cleveland. You invite me here under the guise of that I'm going to share something about really great in Indianapolis, and then you have like 24 people, really charming people, take me for a full day and night around Cleveland, showing me all the things that you have in Cleveland that we don't have in Indianapolis. Very clever. Fortunately, I'm a very positive person, and I'm now trying to take that envy and turn it into inspiration. So that's my goal on the 5-hour drive home. Speaking of inspiration, I do need to call out the amount of inspiration I've gotten from CEOs for Cities, especially under the leadership of your own Lee Fisher, and the inspiration that Lee brings to that organization and now is going to be bringing to your wonderful Cleveland State University. So Lee, thanks for the nice words, but also just thanks for 6 years of friendship and opening up even more of the world to all of us. So thank you very much. Well, I'm so thrilled to be part of such a historic and incredible club and to be a speaker and to learn the history about this. I'd heard about it before I was invited, but I did my homework, and then Dan shared with me even more of this incredible history. I wish, just yet another thing that we don't have in Indianapolis that I want now. So anyway, but I'm so thrilled to speak to you about the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. Thanks for inviting me. I think it's important for us in the Midwest, and I asked people if you guys consider yourself being in the Midwest or on the East, and I was told mostly in the Midwest, and I was thrilled to hear that. But I think in the Midwest especially, we need to own this idea that we are going to go big, bold, and beautiful. And that's what I saw in Cleveland yesterday, and that's what we wanted to do, and that's how we raised $63 million in Indianapolis. We created a narrative and a vision that Indianapolis needs to quit waiting around for the coast to work out all the bugs on ideas, and that we're going to go big, bold, and beautiful. We're going to be the innovative city, and we're going to get the credit for being an innovative, progressive city, and that's how we raised $63 million. We had other stories, other narratives I'll tell you about, but going big and bold is what we all need to do in all of our cities, especially, though, I think, in our Midwestern cities. So the Cultural Trail. So I know I'm speaking on the radio as well, but there's a lot of visuals. If you haven't been on the Cultural Trail, and a lot of you have, and thank you for coming to Indianapolis to do that, it's important to kind of get an understanding visually. So this is the route of the Cultural Trail. It looks like a rectangle through the kind of around the heart of downtown, around the heart of our Soldiers and Sailors Monument, which is actually the geographical and spiritual heart and center not only of Indianapolis, but the entire state of Indiana. So it goes around there, but then it has these corridors. And the corridor on the northeast, up in here, is a corridor called Mass Avenue. And the corridor on the southeast, right around there, is called to Fountain Square. And then we have a corridor that we started, actually, after we started building the Cultural Trail, to our NFL stadium, and I can't quite get there with the pointer, but it's the 5-block corridor, kind of dead middle, south. And because in Indianapolis, if you're going to really please everybody, you got to connect to all of your sports facilities. And when we got a new sports facility, Lucas Oil Stadium, where our Colts play, we had to connect to that. So that's what it looks like. It's 8 miles. If you started in any one place, did the whole journey, and came back to your start, it would be an 11-mile urban journey. And the reason the Cultural Trail got started, the idea came to me because of this brand new initiative that we had in Indianapolis to create cultural districts. And by the way, I saw such incredible neighborhood districts. You guys have way more than we have, and you have ones that are so much. We talked about ours had good bones, but we're suffering, and this is in 2000. Yours have better bones, and they're not suffering anymore if they were at one time. And you have so many opportunities to create this incredible on-street, beautiful, bold bicycle and pedestrian connectivity to these incredible neighborhoods. And I think if you can connect them to downtown, it's going to be an incredible win. But even on some of them, if you can't get all the way to downtown, if you could create one kind of district and connect it to 2 or 3 other districts, that's also going to be a big win. Because people, of course, there's great restaurants we go to, but we don't want to go to the same great restaurant every weekend, right, every night. So if I lived in Ohio City and I could so wonderfully connect to Detroit Shoreline and then so wonderfully connect to another great neighborhood, that would be an awesome reason why I would want to live in any one of those 3 places. Now, you connect me with a great bicycle infrastructure to downtown, and now I'm not leaving Cleveland for any place in America. But even if you can connect some districts to other districts, some neighborhoods to other neighborhoods, that is going to be a game changer, and you're going to see incredible amounts of development and excitement about people living around those connections. We actually started from the framework of thinking that the major theme we believe in the 21st century is connectivity. It's technological connectivity. It's social connectivity. It's economic opportunity connectivity. That's what we need. And these trails, these bike and pedestrian infrastructure, does connectivity in a way that celebrates community, that opens up a different kind, more powerful, more beautiful quality of life. And that's what we thought going in with the trail construction, and that's what we've seen be celebrated really all over the world. And I know that you guys are going to get there, and I've already see it on the off-street connectivity that you have, which is amazing, but you need to add that on-street connectivity. So kind of the origin story was, I moved to California, to Indianapolis, to run the Indiana Repertory Theater, our version of your Cleveland Playhouse. I did that for 7 years, and then I got this life-changing opportunity to become the president and CEO of our community foundation, which, by the way, we also celebrated our 100th anniversary last year. We're 2 years younger than the Cleveland Foundation. I was so thrilled to stay at the 9 where the Cleveland Trust Company, where that whole idea of my life-changing field of work was born. It was a great thrill for me. And I didn't know that Johnny Manziel had also stayed there. I'm gonna have to reconcile that part of it. But what happened was I was brand new at the Community Foundation, and our brand new mayor, Mayor Bart Peterson in 2000, appointed me to as one of his 6 commissioners to this really big, bold new idea for Indianapolis of creating a cultural development commission. And Mayor Peterson committed $1 million a year for 5 years from the city budget, which never happens in Indianapolis, really. And Lilly Endowment matched it dollar for dollar for 5 years. So we had this new initiative, $10 million over 5 years, and I was appointed as one of the 6 commissioners. I was so excited, went to the first meeting, this working group that had kind of shared some ideas, some of which were not so great, but one that I thought was a great idea, and to take these kind of historic village areas and designate them as cultural districts and bring people together to market them and do product development and bring these old Mass Avenue and Fountain Square places that were thriving in the 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, not so much in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and to bring them back. And I love that idea. And I thought this is where, as someone who had worked in the arts, that I could make my mark as the new president of the Community Foundation, and I was going to partner with that, and we were going to transform these cultural districts. And everyone I talked to said, not going to work, it's a stupid idea. These cultural districts are, first of all, they're not very good, they're not very interesting, there's nothing happening there. And by the way, they're too far from downtown, they're too disconnected from downtown, they're too disconnected from each other, forget about it. And I thought that was crazy, but I heard that from dozens of people. I didn't give up on the first 3 or 4 people, and I still didn't give up. And I was writing, one day I was actually a fairly new dad. This is in 2000. I was a late dad, by the way. And I had a kid who was 2 years old. And I had to find survival techniques on a Saturday when I had him from the time he woke up to the time he went to bed. Legos was only good for two hours, okay? So I bought my first bike since I was 16 years old, and I bought a kid's bike seat, and I was going to go explore this thing called the Monon Rail Trail, our one really great rail trail this is 2000. And I saw on a beautiful spring day, April, like a mid-April day, that first day after a horrible Indianapolis winter. I'm from San Diego, so I really know about winters and how they can be tough. And we don't have those, by the way, anymore. Indianapolis, we don't have winters anymore. It's pretty great for us. I'm worried about the rest of the earth, but for us, it's pretty good. And so we had this incredible day, and people are on this Monon Trail just having the time of their lives. And it hit me, we could just do an urban version of the Monon Trail, connect these 5 cultural districts, and that will be the answer. That will be the answer because they'll be connected and we can really make these great places happen. Also, if we're going to be a cultural destination city, as great as my theater was, the Indiana Repertory Theater, as great as our symphony was, other cities around us had great things like that too. And, or even, the Cleveland Symphony. I understand how great that is. So why would people from Cleveland or St. Louis or Chicago or Louisville or Nashville make a weekend trip, which is one of our goals, and stay in Indianapolis? We needed to have something that was unique that they didn't have. Our theater was really good, but not that much unique from their theater. But these cultural districts, these wonderful neighborhoods, those are inherently unique. I've never seen a neighborhood like Ohio City. I'd never been in a neighborhood that was a unique experience for me yesterday. So this is where the cultural districts are. This is a map of downtown, and you see that we have 5 original cultural districts, kind of northwest, midwest, northeast, kind of right in the center of the city, and southeast. And so this work went forward, and we branded them, and it's Indiana Avenue, Mass Avenue, the Canal and White River State Park, Wholesale District, and Fountain Square, and that's where they are. And so we decided that we're going to connect them with this thing called the Cultural Trail. This is an example of what the trail looked like in its early design, and the important thing here is that we knew we had to make it big and bold and beautiful and also safe. We had no biking culture. We really had a couple hundred people in a bike club that would ride on Wednesdays, but we had no inherent biking culture in Indianapolis because we were a car city and there was really no place to ride other than the Monon. The Monon was the first start of a little bit of a biking culture, but most people did not have bikes. And I never had one until I had to get one because I had a kid. So what we have here is we always were going to have a curbed buffer, at least a minimum of a 4-foot curbed buffer from a bicycle to a car. And then we have 8 feet for bicyclists. We have a 4-foot buffer that's beautifully landscaped, and then we have the pedestrian pathway. And this is an example of what Alabama Street, this is the first leg, where the first leg of the Cultural Trail went on, by the way. And it went on this leg because we didn't want to upset anybody during construction. So we picked a leg where there was nothing going on, okay? And this was a pretty ugly street. And now it looks like this. And on the radio, I wish you could see it. Go to IndianapolisCulturalTrail.org, and you'll see these incredible pictures. But this is the beautiful paving, and both for the bicycles and the pedestrians, beautiful landscaping. People would always ask me, what's your favorite part of the trail? What's your favorite part of the trail? It's 8 miles long. And when we were building it, my favorite part was where the coolest buildings were, or where the infrastructure around it was most interesting. But now that it's all done, my favorite parts of the trail are where the landscaping is most lush and beautiful. And I think this is a very important lesson. People agree with me, by the way. And I'm not even someone who was into gardening or flowers or trees. I only can name 3 trees. But I appreciate how beautiful, and the experience you have when you're on the trail. And this is one of our guiding principles, which I think is very important for your work ahead. We wanted the journey to be as beautiful and inspiring as any of the destinations. Bicycling is 2 things. It is a journey. People bicycle just for the journey. People walk just for the experience of walking. And they only walk, by the way, when they're walking by interesting things or places of beauty. So you have to make the journey to these beautiful neighborhoods, to your downtown, between downtown and University Circle. You have to make the journey beautiful to get the full impact of the potential. So here we see, I'm just going to go soon, here's some people riding bikes on this trail. Just to give you an example of what the trail looks like with all the landscaping. It's lit for nighttime use. It's beautifully paved. The crosswalks. We actually learned this when we finally got this project green lighted by the mayor. After about 3 years of hard work, we started and we got serious about the design. We did a big international design competition. We picked the best one, and it was a group from both Muncie, Indiana, and Indianapolis. And they were the best because they're very talented. They work all over the country, but they also respected all the work that went before them. We had 4 years of big-time conversations, hundreds of conversations in community, lots of effort of thinking about how this is going to be world-class. And then we had some East Coast, really East Coast designers come in to tell us, hey, look, here's what we're going to be able to do for you people in Indianapolis. And that did not go over well, especially for me. And they did not get the job. But we did pick an incredibly talented design firm called Rundell Ernstberger and Associates. But here's what we learned. We sent a group of people to the best bicycling cities in the world at that time, which was Copenhagen, of course, and Amsterdam, but also Paris was doing all the new stuff, and this is, again, about 2005. And Boulder was the one city we went to at the time in America, Montreal. And what we were told is, you know what? First of all, if you guys do this the way you say you're going to do it, you're going to take this a whole nother notch than any of us have done it. But if you screw it up, you're going to set back bicycling for 30 years. So please don't mess it up. And by the way, this idea that you would have bicycles going back, 2 different directions on one side of the street, they had not done that. They had like single, cycle tracks, bike lanes on one side, and then on the other side of the street, bike lanes going the other way. Where we had a cultural trail where bicycles are going in both directions on one side of the street. And they said, here's what you do need to do. You need to make the intersections look different than any other intersections, because cars otherwise will not expect bicycles coming from the other direction, and there will be problems. So we took that to heart, and every intersection has this cultural trail kind of logoing where we have these stencils, these beautiful color stencils that mark each intersection. But we did something even better than that. We created intersection plazas. So we would shrink the intersection, and we would make every intersection more about the pedestrian and the bicyclist than about the car. The cars have to slow down because then it gets narrow there at the intersection. And then also, if you're a bicyclist or a runner, you can kind of gauge, even on a red light, you can kind of see if anything's coming, and then you can kind of go because you're only going over 2 small, narrow lanes. So it's all about the scale for the human on the cultural trail, not for the car, and it's a big place-making difference. So just more people enjoying the trail. We have this incredible downtown canal that a lot of visitors in Indianapolis don't even know we have. So that is now part of the cultural trail, but there's another route that you can, if that's too busy, and sometimes it is for bicycles, then there's another bike route that's also a western route for the trail. And there's another picture of our beautiful downtown canal and our skyline. And just more people kind of seeing the great lushness of the treescape and the landscaping. It's the use is incredibly diverse. We have people of every age. In fact, this is a good time to speak about the fact that we actually thought when we were building this, somehow we learned, I think we actually thought we came up with this idea of an 8 to 80 facility. I think everyone came up with it at the same time because we heard it from others, but we didn't copy it. We invented it too, 8 to 80. But when we built the Cultural Trail, we realized that it's not an 8 to 80 facility. It's a 4 to 94-year-olds. I see 4 and 5-year-olds all the time learning to riding their bikes in a very vibrant downtown. Why? Because it's so inviting, beautiful, and safe. We've been completely operative with all 8 miles for 4 years now, have not had anyone hurt on the Cultural Trail from a car, have not had any car accidents with bikers or walkers or pedestrian or runners on the Cultural Trail. And those intersections are safe as well because they change the way people look at those intersections. But it's also very racially and age diverse, and that's my 5-minute mark. I did that on purpose. It's not a mistake. So I'm going to jump to a few more things here. So we sold this. One of the things I want you to think about is, and I've thought a lot about this over the years, and now I advise people in our community have an idea that they want to do in community. A lot of times you have to go bigger. There's good ideas out there, and they're really good ideas, but they don't touch enough people. And the way I always think about this now is your idea has to touch enough community themes. You have to connect your idea into large community themes. The more themes you connect with, the more stakeholders are going to be excited about your idea. Plus, if your idea can add value to their project, then everyone wins. And so we knew that the Cultural Trail was about changing the national and global reputation of Indianapolis. We didn't have a bad reputation. We had no reputation. We have a growing reputation as a place for quality of life and a great place to live and a great place to move your business. And the trail has been a big part of that because it's been something that no one else has quite in the way that we have it. It's because you get a lot of attention for being the innovator. But it's also, we sold it on economic development. You have to sell everything on economic development in America. You just have to. You can lament about it if you're an arts organization. You can lament about it if you're in any sector. Lament all you want over the wonderful craft beers in Cleveland, Ohio, but you have to ultimately sell it on economic development, tourism, building the tax base. But then it's about this connectivity idea, which is so powerful in the 21st century. But community health, we sold it from community health. Multimodal transportation, and eventually, not at the beginning, in 2000, Indianapolis had no environmental consciousness, but by about 2006, they did, and we started to sell it about the environment. A lot of planning lenses. What motivated me, though, is I'm someone who just loves Indianapolis. It's changed my life moving there, and a lot of it is something I've learned is consistent with Midwestern cities all over, this incredible sense of welcome, this incredible sense of people being so nice, this incredible sense of people working together for a better result for all. I just feel that. Every Midwestern city I go to, I feel it very heavily in Indianapolis, something I didn't feel growing up in California, something I love, and I want everyone else to love Indianapolis. So I raised $63 million really based on this idea that people will start to understand what a great city is, what a great city Indianapolis is, and will understand the work that had gone on for 20 or 30 years before this was incredibly good work, and that this is a city that needs to be celebrated, and the Cultural Trail will help do that. We had tons of community partners. I get a lot of credit for this. I had this lucky idea. I had a mayor who told me he couldn't politically be the face of it, so he wanted me to be the face of it. The greatest gift of my life. But it takes so much money, so many partners, so many champions, and we in Indianapolis have that as you have it here in Cleveland. We raised $63 million, 27.5 from private philanthropy, 35.5 from federal transportation funds. I never asked our city for any money out of the budget. I knew we weren't going to get any, didn't want to waste my time, didn't want to put them in a negative position. We just went out and raised the money. They were a great partner in helping raise federal dollars. We got a $20.5 million Tiger One grant that put us over the top after the Great Recession. Parcels on or with 500 feet of the Cultural Trail saw an increase of assessed property value of $1 billion in a very tough economic environment of 2008 to 2014. The rest of the county was flat. The Cultural Trail parcels went up 147%. There's been, now I think we're at $1 billion of new development within that 500 feet of the parcels of the Cultural Trail. Just a couple of pictures here. This is a brand new development that's under construction right now on Mass Avenue. The city moved an old firehouse to make room for this, because this was the one block on Mass Avenue from great stuff to great stuff from a public space perspective. And so now we've removed the barrier and moved it to a better place. And now this is going to be the final connector of 8 blocks on Mass Avenue, an incredibly, incredibly vibrant cultural district, 52 restaurants, all local, within those 8 blocks. This is another new development called Bottle Works, just approved by our Historic Preservation Commission, $250 million new development. But before and after pictures. Before and after pictures are your best sales tool. This was on the Cultural Trail on Fletcher Place, which is actually a new cultural district because it didn't exist until the Cultural Trail made it exist. This is what it looked like before. And this is what it looks like now. Beautiful mixed-use development, beautiful trail, beautiful streetscape. This was the worst Department of Motor Vehicle branch in the history of America. And now it's the beautiful Cultural Trail. I'm running out of time. I look forward to your questions. Thank you for inviting me. And it's been a thrill to be with you here in Cleveland.
Thank you. Just stand over here for a second.
Okay.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan Moulthrop, Chief Executive here at the City Club, and today we are enjoying a Friday Forum with Brian Payne. He's the President and CEO of the Central Indiana Community Foundation, and he's the also unofficial but clearly very much the civic champion of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. We're about to begin the audience Q&A, and we welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, those of you joining us via our radio broadcast, our webcast, or our Facebook Live video. I understand we have a special group joining us at the Vermont Department of Transportation today, so a special shout out to all of you. Maybe we have our first question, please.
Who actually owns the trail, and how do you manage the ongoing maintenance of both the hardscape and the landscape?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That was something I was going to address and then ran out of time. So the maintenance is incredibly important. And I knew that going in before we raised a single dollar, but even if I hadn't known that, every donor I went to said, okay, if we give you money to make this trail happen and build it, who is going to maintain it, knowing that our city is not well equipped to maintain that. I'm a huge believer, I think this is very important, I'm a huge believer that someone has to wake up every morning with a passion of how to keep the cultural trail a world-class amenity for the residents and visitors of Indianapolis. They have to wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't do that, or oh my gosh, what have this happened? They have to bring that kind of passion and be accountable to that. So we had a plan right from the beginning to create a not-for-profit called Indianapolis Cultural Trail, Inc. My foundation, the community foundation, we created it. We recruited board members. We incubated it. And then we moved it out into its own world, and now it exists outside of us. But that was the reason people gave. We had a clear understanding of how we are going to maintain it as world class, and part of that $63 million, $6 million, we raised as a maintenance endowment. The goal was 5, we raised 6. I wish we could have raised 10, but 6 kicks out 5% or $300,000 every year, and it's enough to maintain all the beautiful landscaping. Cultural Trail Inc. needs to raise a little bit of money to enhance that. The city, actually, I need to give them props. They have come on, they pay for like trash, not litter pickup, but trash can pickup. They pay for the water to irrigate all of it. All the plant beds are irrigated. They pay for the water. They pay for the electricity, for the lights. So the city's come in as a good maintenance and operations partner, but you have to have someone who's really accountable to a board, and it can't just be an ever-shifting person in an administration of a mayor that's one part of their job. I would not invest in that, and I would not advise anyone else to invest in that maintenance model. You need someone who's really passionate and accountable to keeping it world-class. Like Metro Parks in Cleveland, I would imagine. I've seen that they do that.
Hi, thanks for your comments. They're great. The cycling community is pretty broad and covers an awful lot of subjects. Do you find that it's not just tourists who are wandering and using the trail, but also commuters going to work, or is that the purpose of some of the other add-ons that you are building?
So yeah, another. Thank you very much. So the cultural trail, so it's all about connectivity with the cultural trail. We talked about the cultural districts. What I didn't get the chance to say is it could have connected all the cultural districts and been the original 5.8-mile design, but the opportunity came along the way, and this is another metaphor I think is very important. My metaphor for this community work is get in the game. Get in the game. Start with something. Do something. And then all these opportunities can evolve and pop up once you're in the game. Of course, if you're never in the game, nothing's ever going to pop up. So we got in the game with this planning, with this conversation, and then we learned that, hey, if we just did this and did that, we now connect to every arts, cultural, heritage, sports, and entertainment venue in all of a vibrant downtown of Indianapolis. We then connect to all these cultural districts, and actually a new cultural district has popped up called Market East on that Alabama street where nothing happened. Now it actually, in 2 years, it might be the most vibrant, interesting, beautiful street in all of downtown Indianapolis, going from 0 to 100 in about 8 years. But we also, this is really answering your question, we also are now, the Cultural Trail is the downtown hub for all this other incredible Greenway Trails that have happened, but they all stopped outside of downtown, kind of like what's happening with what I saw yesterday. You have a lot of these great trails. We have a Monon rail trail. We have the White River Trail along our White River. We have the Pogues Run Trail, a new trail, and we have the Pleasant Run Trail connecting on the south side of Fountain Square, on the south side of Indianapolis, connects into a set of beautiful parks along a parkway. All of those surrounded downtown by 2 or 3 miles, but never got to downtown. The Cultural Trail is a hub that connects to all of those. So now you can go northwest, northeast, due south, and I'm missing one, kind of southeast. So the Cultural Trail is the hub for all these other Greenway trails to connect to each other downtown and to connect to downtown. So all that connection happens with the Cultural Trail, and that's why it grew from originally a $35 million project to a $63 million, because it got bigger and bigger and bigger to connect to more things and more people's community interests and community themes. Bigger is better in this case.
Hi, how did you manage the optics and the practicalities of taking space away from cars? Some of these roads seem like they were sort of low traffic. Others seem like major arteries. So how did you handle that? And also, does anyone actually ride their bikes to a Colts game?
Actually, you know what? Actually, a lot of people ride their bikes to Colts games. Even some in December, but way more in October and November. So I actually go to 2 or 3 Colts games a year. I park. I park in my free parking space at my office, which is about 3 miles from the Lucas Oil Stadium, and I always ride in. And I've ridden in for the Super Bowl in February when we hosted it, and I've ridden into December when it was about 25 degrees, and you can do it. And we have bike shares at the Colts Stadium, and we have bike shares all over downtown on the Cultural. So yes, they do ride bikes to Colts games. That was a brilliant vision to connect to Lucas Oil Stadium. Not mine, but it was brilliant. So, what was your question? You challenged me on the whole Colts thing. Okay. So I think it's a lot easier now. I mean, maybe not in your city, but it's a lot easier now in most cities because when we did it in 2000 to 2005, 6. When the planning was happening, it was a brand new idea in Indianapolis. So we had to fight that. So, but we had, like you, we had really wide thoroughfares. And I think one of the things that has to happen is you need to connect with a cultural trail like a Cleveland version. You should never copy any other city's thing. You got to make it your own unique thing. And the Midway. I'm thrilled about the Midway. I can't wait to ride the Midway. We have only about 3 blocks that's a Midway. The rest of it's on one side or the other. Barcelona, by the way, has miles and miles of Midway, and it makes Barcelona, Barcelona. So, here's what happens. First of all, like on Superior Street, I saw that yesterday. Someone ought to write a check right now for whatever it is, $25 million, whatever you need, to create that connectivity from downtown along Superior to University Circle. And that physically is so easy to do because you have more lane capacity than you need, but the lanes are incredibly wide. I mean, it's actually, there's lots of great infrastructure there as far as beautiful buildings, also beautiful empty lots that could be beautiful things. But it's a sea of gray. And you have so much width of each lane. On Alabama Street, we didn't have to take any lanes or any parking. We had wide lanes like that. We just shrunk 4 wide lanes into normal lanes, and we had enough for the Cultural Trail. Sometimes we did have to take off-street parking off. Sometimes we did remove a lane. But and especially in a downtown or in a neighborhood like Ohio City, you want cars to go slower. We had cars going 55 miles an hour in the heart of our downtown because it was 5 lanes, one way. I have a Miata. I would love to drive that 65 miles down the middle of Indianapolis at the time, but it's not good for the living in Indianapolis. It's not good for working there. It's not good for walking across the street. It would be a death match, with the cars. You have the capacity. You just need to prioritize it right. And you are, and you still need to do that. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Big fan of what you've done. Absolutely tremendous job. Funding aside, what challenges do you think that are unique to Cleveland that not necessarily you experienced in Indianapolis? That you think, what issues do you think are unique to us that you didn't have to deal with?
I may not know Cleveland well enough to know what's uniquely the challenge here. I do think, ultimately these roads are owned by the city. I mean, I think we spent $25,000 in buying property. We had to buy a couple little corners to do the intersection plazas like we wanted to on a couple places. But it was all city-owned. It's city-owned land. Now, what you have in your favor now that we didn't have in our favor is you have dozens of examples all over the country. I mean, I'm dumbfounded right now when I meet someone who's involved in community and in civic life, a mayor's administration, people who work for a mayor in any city. I am dumbfounded that they don't see easily the power of these connectivity infrastructure, bicycle and pedestrian. It's like, really? Can I show you about 2 dozen over here and another dozen over there? And everyone that does it gets huge benefits from it. Huge benefits of really good development. Huge benefits of economic development and tax base, of people living there and wanting to live there, of people who are disadvantaged having other kinds of access to opportunity. It all works. I was just at a People for Bikes conference. It's a national organization for bicycle and bicycle infrastructure in America. It's actually a great organization and a powerful conference. But the theme of that conference was, it's not about the bike. In fact, bike advocates, the worst thing they can do is come in and say why they want more bike infrastructure because they like to ride a bike. It's about creating, it's just lucky, if you like bike riding, that creating bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is the best way to create quality of life in our cities and in all parts of our communities. In rural, in suburbs, it works everywhere. But, so I understand that there's some people who haven't gotten the religion yet in Cleveland about this kind of great, safe bicycle infrastructure with kids, where kids can do it easily, where families can do it together, and you just need to show them. I'm happy to host them in Indianapolis, but there's dozens of other cities that are doing this, and you have your own examples. When you create it, you see great things happening in your neighborhoods and in your city. I mean, you have a tool that I didn't have. You have dozens of examples of how this is working all over the country. We didn't have that when we started this in 2000. So you just need to grab people by the neck nicely, as Midwesterners would, shake them a little bit, and then show them these great examples.
Someone's holding the mic for me. This feels very official. Hi, I am Dan Cohn, and I'm with the Mount Sinai Foundation. I had a few questions that I promise I'll wrap up all into one, separated by commas. The first is, can you talk a little bit about perhaps unintended consequences of the work, focusing maybe on residential displacement and or the ways in which benefits, the extent to which benefits of this work have been distributed equitably or perhaps not, just broadly speaking?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So as we started building the Cultural Trail, this thought that this trail could create such a vibrant marketplace that it could become negative for some people. That I've been aware of that for 5 or 6 years, and I've been asking my friends, especially in that south corridor, Fountain Square. That's a traditionally Appalachian community. People moved up here from Kentucky and West Virginia for manufacturing jobs in the 30s, 40s, 50s. It has a huge culture there of that, and we were very worried about whether we would create any negativity for that group of folks in our community. And so we've been really eyeing it. And in fact, along the Cultural Trail, like on the Cultural Trail, there's been commercial displacement, and there's been a little bit of, prices have gone way up within a block each of the trail, but there were so many empty, vacant spaces farther away that right now it's not displacing anyone, but we're still worried about it. We've actually, we with others in the community commissioned a big study about where we have gentrification in Indianapolis, and we were told that we have maybe 5 census tracts. And census tracts, like in Indianapolis, we have thousands of census tracts, right? They're little micro neighborhoods, right? I mean, like, they could be like 3 blocks by 3 blocks. And we have only 5 of these 3 block by 3 block areas where we've seen, now gentrification for most economists is where you had a neighborhood that was underperforming in housing prices and now is overperforming the average. It's not like it's gone from 100,000 to an average of 500,000 and people have had to flee. It's gone from just being below average to being somewhere above average. Our biggest problem in Indianapolis in our first-tier suburbs is that we still are seeing some housing prices go down. We need more good development. We need more things like the Cultural Trail, but we need to keep our eyes on it. And my foundation is going to be doing affordable housing in these cultural districts where we're worried that some people could be displaced. We're going to invest in affordable housing. I've been educated that you cannot beat capitalism. Capitalism is so strong, you cannot You cannot stop it. You cannot thwart it. You cannot tinker with it. You need to fight capitalism with capitalism. We're going to put money in affordable housing and try to keep the supply of affordable housing alive as these neighborhoods become very popular. But I think that's the right approach because, you know, this is definitely 90% positive and could be 10% negative. I think, and things are going to change anyway. I think that what we have to do in communities is celebrate the positive of these investments. This is good investment. We have to celebrate the positive of that. And then how do we mitigate? How do we work smart together to mitigate the 10% negativity and get rid of that negativity? But just to say, we're not going to do anything because 10% of people are going to be, have to deal with some difficulties. No, let's mitigate that. Let's put in money to mitigate that. That's the way we're looking at it. That's been a long journey for us, and I'm still trying to get educated on that, but that's what I've learned so far.
From Twitter, you mentioned community partners. Were there any healthcare organizations involved in the planning or execution of the cultural trail?
There weren't, and I'm as dumbfounded as all of you that why there weren't. The university, which has a big medical center, was a big partner from a advocacy perspective. It's Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. It's our urban university that has all of our major professional programs. So the law school, we have a law school there. The medical school has always been there, not at Bloomington, where Indiana University's kind of flagship campus is. So we had great advocacy, and it goes through Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. All of our donors said it needed to connect to the medical school and the medical infrastructure. That wasn't the original plan, but because of that economic development opportunity, we did that. But the big healthcare systems, we have 4 big healthcare systems. One is downtown, and this connects to their corporate headquarters. We just couldn't get the CEO to budge. We couldn't get him. He was one of the few people, actually, who we could not get to see the bigger vision. And I would think that I haven't talked to him lately, but I think that he would realize that maybe he missed an opportunity. Is that Hoosier nice enough? I don't know. Maybe not. I'm from California originally.
Mr. Payne, you have along the way made some fascinating comments about institutional competence and esprit to take on a big, bold, beautiful challenge. You talked about the virtue of a nonprofit corporation. You've got the city as a partner. You've also got the community foundation. But I want to ask you about one of your critical partners, the source of a third of your capital, the federal government. And I was involved in a bike path issue a long time ago, and I recall a federal regulation requiring us to have bike lanes or bike paths 10 feet wide, which actually ultimately killed the project, too wide. And I think you've got 8-foot wide paths now. And I wonder, is that a window on the important question of how your relationship was with the federal government? It obviously was successful. Were they insightful and responsive as you work with them?
You know, that's a good question. And so we did, I'm remembering now, and I wish I had one of our engineering partners here at the city to answer your question better. But I know that, first of all, when I showed, and I didn't have time to explain all the details, that 8-foot, when it's 8 foot wide, we have a separate pedestrian pathway to go along with it. We also have a 4-foot buffer at least. So the 8-foot wide is the pavers for the bicycles, but there's actually wider than that because of the buffers and because of the pedestrian pathway. Sometimes though, out of the 8 miles, 4 miles is what I showed you in that design. There's another 4 miles where we had to combine the pedestrians and the bicycles together, and that still has the 4-foot buffer, but that has a 10-foot wide paving for bicycles and pedestrians together. There was some times though that we were in discussion about, is this corridor wide enough? And we got a couple of exceptions. We were able to get some ruling. I can't remember if it was the federal government who gave us that or just the city or the state, but we did have some debate about whether we could narrow in a few moments on the trail and get away with it. Ultimately, we did, but that width was a discussion at times, but it was never a big deal. It was a momentary discussion in one meeting or a next meeting. It wasn't a defining part of our challenge.
So we're trending on Twitter at the moment. One more question. How has the city dealt with the increased tax burden on the community that existed in the areas before the trail was built?
The existing tax burden?
Yeah. Increased tax burden.
I think they've taken the $1 billion of increase in assessed property and utilized a lot of the tax base that comes from that to pay for whatever small amount of tax burden is and having more people. It's never come up. The city sees this. The city has only seen this as a revenue positive, especially, they didn't have to invest they don't have any money up front, right? So it's all, but on an operation side, first of all, we have that endowment. The city sees this as a continuing huge win, and we completed all 8 miles that we wanted to, but the city and city leaders, other city leaders, the corporate community wants to extend the trail in 2 different directions, about a half mile each, one to a big biosciences research institute that Lilly Endowment has given tens of millions of dollars to help locate and create in Indianapolis. They see a big part of the success of that research institute, and it's actually bigger than that because they want to relocate all kinds of companies there as an innovation center. It's called 16 Tech, and everyone wants the Cultural Trail to expand about a half a mile to be the gateway into 16 Tech, and the same on the south side with another development and with our beautiful new YMCA that people want to connect to. So the city only sees this as positive, and it's been revenue producing. We haven't had to deal with that challenge.
So I think behind that last question was actually, for homeowners who find that their property tax is going up.
For homeowners, not the city itself.
So if you could address that. The other question, though, we've been looking at this picture that you've had up for the last half hour or so of what was a windswept, empty kind of warehousey type space. I think you identified it as the worst DMV in America.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful residential building, obviously a new residential building. And I was reminded how projects like this can be very catalytic for developers who suddenly see this sort of thing coming and then and prepare themselves and create, buy the empty lots, prepare the plans, the architecture, pull the permits, start building and making new residential units. Can you talk about what that process was like? How quickly after you began to publicly talk about the trail did developers realize the opportunity and start getting themselves either in place along the trail or after it was built?
So actually, here's a good one. This is our old NBA arena that was torn down when we built a new NBA arena. For about 15 years, it was an empty surface parking lot. And now the trail goes by it, and this is part of the new Market East. And that's almost done right now. That's the tallest residential building we have, and a Whole Foods will be in the bottom. This is on Alabama Street where nothing existed in 2007. So that whole idea of displacement again. We've seen a little bit of that property tax increase. We have a city councilman who's trying to get. We can't do anything in Indianapolis until the state of Indiana tells us we can. I don't know if you have that issue here in Ohio. Lee, if you do have it, I would have thought you would have taken care of it when you were lieutenant governor. Anyway, it's a problem, but we're trying to get the permission to put brakes, hit the brakes on property tax assessments, so that if you lived in Fountain Square and you see that your $150,000 home is now worth $300,000, that you would get a slow roll up to paying the full property tax over like a 5-7 year period. We don't have the permission to do that yet. We're watching that. The city's watching it. We're concerned, but again, it's not to acknowledge it as a problem for a couple of dozen individuals. Maybe we're watching it, but it hasn't been a widespread problem. It could be though, and we're watching it, and we're trying to figure out how to do it both from a philanthropic perspective and a city policy perspective. It's a very important question. We've been lucky that we just don't have. Fountain Square had so many empty lots, vacant lots. It's changing for the good. We're watching it. It hasn't been a huge problem yet. The second part of that question, private developers. I got to give a shout out to my friend Tom Batista, who had this little property and an old building that had the one really good restaurant on Mass Avenue before the Cultural Trail. He was a huge advocate for the Cultural Trail, and then after that, he learned that we're going to put it in Fountain Square on the south side, and he did buy property on the south side and created two of our best restaurants. He was the visionary to follow the trail before anyone else did. After we built about 4 miles, and people believed, and after the Great Recession, which people thought maybe we weren't going to get it done, when we got the Tiger Grant, and they knew it was going to happen because we had the money, then to finish the last 4 miles, there was a race to accumulate property for development. When they were sure, absolutely sure, that it was going to actually be realized in certain areas, then they bought. Thanks again for your wonderful questions.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a Friday Forum featuring Brian Payne, President and CEO of the Central Indiana Community Foundation and Civic Champion of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. Mr. Payne appears as part of the American Planning Association Cleveland's We Plan CLE initiative. And we thank you all for being here today. That brings us to the end of our program today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. Mr. Payne, thank you very much. Our forum is adjourned. Have a wonderful weekend.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.